Hi, this is Josh Lawler of Zuber Lawler, a pioneer in legal innovation at the intersection of law and Web3 technology. You're tuned into the Edge of NFT, your go-to destination for unraveling the complexities of blockchain, NFTs, and emerging tech. Keep listening.
Hey, Web3 curious listeners, stay tuned for today's episode to learn why a securities lawyer got fascinated by blockchain and made it one of the focal points of his practice.
And why you might want to reconsider jumping headfirst into starting or being part of a Dow.
And finally, what makes the new ERC-404 standard different and a little bit complicated?
It's a super interesting show today, so grab your popcorn as we cue the intro.
Welcome to the Edge of NFT, the podcast that brings you the top 1% of Web3 today and what will stand the test of time. We explore the nuts and bolts of the business side and also the human element of how Web3 is changing the way we interact with the things we love. This podcast is for the dreamers, disruptors, and doers who are pumped about this ecosystem and driving where it goes next.
Welcome to the Edge of NFT, the podcast created by Jeff Kelly, Ethan Jenny, and Josh Krieger, featuring a variety of top-notch guests and other hosts like myself, Richard Carthon.
It's another production of the Edge of Company, a quickly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 tech and culture, and responsible for other groundbreaking endeavors like the Outer Edge LA Innovation Festival.
Today's sponsored episode features Josh Lawler, who is an attorney, counsel, and futurist with nearly 25 years in practice at Skadden Arps, and of course, Zuber Lawler. Well, Josh, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you virtually, Josh. We've got a chance to run into each other a lot lately, not only at Future Blockchain Summit in Dubai, but recently Satoshi Roundtable. Not to mention, of course, glad to have you as a member of Josh Dow.
Oh, well, glad to be a member of Josh Dow also. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times we ran into each other last year at various events, but, you know, really your kind of being out there with Edge was instrumental in deciding that we wanted to work together.
Appreciate that. And, I really appreciate your insights and conversations around this evolving landscape. I've learned a lot from you and excited to share some of these lessons learned with our audience as well. But to kick things off, we were both at Satoshi Roundtable, which was pretty epic this year. Of course, we can't talk specifically about who said what, but we can highlight some of the themes that stood out. And I'm curious, what did stand out to you this time around?
Real world asset tokenization is a very real thing, and we're going to see more and more of that. There is a disconnect between token issuing companies that also issue equity and the investors that invest at them and the limited partners of those investors in terms of exactly what role the token plays and how to best capture value, which that was probably the biggest one. I think I probably saw that 4 or 5 times.
For me, I was, obviously Satoshi Roundtable, it has its essence and sort of the DNA of Bitcoin, but I was really intrigued by the layers of sophisticated conversation around the building that's happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem right now. Projects like Babylon and some of the additional building happening with stacks, of course, going from, the 10 to 15 minute time for Bitcoin transactions to 5 to 15 seconds in a couple months with the Nakamoto upgrade. There was a lot of like high intensity energy around the potential of Bitcoin to lead this next bull cycle that I didn't quite anticipate. Not sure if you've been to Satoshi before, if that's like a common thing or if that was specific to this year.
Yeah, so I actually haven't been to Satoshi before, but it did occur to me that I need to say that nothing that I say is legal advice or investment advice, because that tripped me into saying, yeah, I think Bitcoin either crossed or came very close to crossing 50,000 a day. So that's, kind of showing exactly what you're saying. In terms of kind of what I saw, you go to the things that you're interested in. I did see a lot of that Bitcoin build, and the stacks piece was interesting. particularly because ordinals and Bitcoin use cases that are not just UTX, medium of exchange, are prevalent. That's what the industry is pushing to generate traffic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I just remember Josh coming back and being really fired up about Satoshi and everything with it. And it's cool that you come give, some of that insight as well to our listeners. But I want to kind of dive into a little bit what you just said about this not being legal advice or financial advice, but really getting to the core around, law being a foundational part of business and being a part of Web3 and emerging technologies like blockchain. But before we kind of get deeper into the legal side of things, I just want to dive a little bit more into like what brought you to this space. Like you could have gone in a lot of different directions. Why Web3?
Well, it helped that I've been a securities lawyer for as long as I have. I've been in Southern California, surrounded by people who have been excited about this since 2009, 2010, many of whom made a lot of money in it. I did not. I was, back then and all the way through 2017, kind of a skeptic. But then when ICO mania hit and it became about securities law, I figured I needed to check things out just so I would understand. And when I started reading the tech pieces of it, the consensus algorithms and use cases and things of that nature, my brain just kind of exploded with it for a while. And it's very easy to get passionate about because we're looking at a technology that changes what has been a fundamental human paradigm for thousands of years, which is the centralized ledger, of course. There used to be no other way to do it than a centralized ledger. But now here we are and there is. And that changes almost everything because government regulates on centralized ledgers a lot.
Yeah. Having that correlation, I think, into securities is definitely a big piece of this, and one of the drawbacks, unfortunately, of what we've been seeing is around like the evolution around Web3 moving faster United States. I've seen a lot of business and things transpiring overseas just because of things kind of slowing down from a regulation standpoint after FTX and everything else that happened a couple years back. But a lot of things are kind of shaping up, and actually, I think there's like a couple of like regulatory like bodies that we can kind of speak on. Josh, I think you had a question on that.
Yeah, so we've got bodies like the CFTC and the SEC that are trying to navigate these jurisdictional issues in cases that are involving blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. How do these two bodies work together, or in some cases not work together? And how does that sort of impact your sort of approach to counsel in this area?
Sure. So yeah, there's a little bit of a turf war between the two. So what you have to understand is that almost everything is a commodity, and certain things are exempted out of the Commodity Exchange Act, and securities, as in just securities, not derivative securities, is kind of one of those things that's exempted, and that kind of is a line that's drawn. And then the other thing to realize is that the Commodity Exchange Act does not give the CFTC power to regulate spot markets very much. They can go in for fraud and market manipulation, but it's not something where they're regulating people who deal only in spot transactions. It's one of the reasons they went after Binance and went after BitMEX. There's like a lot of leverage in futures and things like that there, so it was in their jurisdiction. But most things that are now in the United States are not. So I don't really think about the CFTC too much. The SEC, I think about every day. I care about them greatly, right? They have been, a colossal obstructionist. Really, first order, doing everything that government is not supposed to do. So yeah, there I said it. And I think that they've kind of gotten their comeuppance recently, in that the courts have, basically found correctly, thankfully, that they don't have jurisdiction in a number of the places that they've asserted jurisdiction. And somebody's going to have to move in. Congress needs to put somebody in who is going to be able to regulate this, because we do need regulation. We just need the right regulation.
Does that mean that CFTC should have more regulatory power in your mind, or are we talking about another entity?
Yeah, absolutely not. So the CFTC does not look at issuance and information of anything. So the idea that you're suddenly going to put with it, an entity, a DAO, a company, whatever it might be, and you're going to say, oh, send us all your information and periodically put out other information. That's just not what they do. And I think it would be pretty disastrous to try to get them to do that. So I think we need something new. If I was going to put it with anything existing, it would be actually the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, because a lot of securities law is really consumer protection in the first place. And that's who does consumer protection.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. And I think we could spend a lot of time on that. But I first want to go back and revisit your friends over at the SEC. Recently the SEC approved the Bitcoin ETF, which took a lot of time, but has paused the Ethereum ETF, and even is going as far as to try to make the claim that ETH can be considered a security. How do you see this evolving as cryptocurrency and Web3 continues to evolve?
Got it. Well, to start with, you're probably going to see a result in the next presidential election before you see anything happen with the ETH ETF. The Bitcoin ETFs, as you mentioned, they delayed. They delayed for years. I think 6 years or something like that since the initial ETF application. And they got to a point where Congress was telling them, you have to act. The courts were telling them, you have to act. They really had a lot of pressure on them to do something. And then you have the other element, which is Bitcoin is the only digital asset that they've come out and said this is not a security. Now, that doesn't mean an ETF based on it isn't a security, but it does make it kind of a little bit different than everything else. They also had to deal with the fact that you already had Grayscale Bitcoin Trust out there for people to get exposure, except it was a lot more expensive to get exposure through that than it would be through an ETF, which for anybody who is listening, it's still more expensive than just buying the Bitcoin yourself, but that's its own thing, which was not financial advice, to be clear. So ETH is going to take time. And if we get a Republican, let me put this a different way. If we get a non-democratic or non-democrat, definitely democratic, but a non-democrat president, then you might see faster approvals there. If we stay with kind of the same administration we have, it's going to continue to be thick.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how the political landscape of this and what action is being taken for Web3 to become a little bit more accepted and utilized, and even between Congress, between Bitcoin mining and just how crypto is widely used. But one of the things, as being a part of this, like you said, it took 6 years for this to come through, and people are really amped up about Ethereum. But the whole, whether or not a security piece, I think will be very critical in how this continues to pan out and play out. But what are some other recent precedents or legal rulings that you think are starting to shape some regulatory landscape for blockchain and crypto?
Sure. So I don't know that I'd call it recent anymore, but the Ripple ruling and the appeal hasn't been ruled upon yet. That was an earthquake to the entire U.S. industry and really the world, because it changed the landscape by providing some guidance in terms of what you can and what you can't do. And I think the court mostly got it right, but the SEC is appealing, so we have to kind of wait for that to happen. And for anybody who kind of understands this stuff, it basically would mean that you only have to deal with whether you're a security in the actual initial investment contract. So when the project sells the token or SAFT, there's an implicit kind of promise that says, we're going to push this, use case and demand to make this jump. But if it's a secondary sale, which means it's not that initial sale, it's something on an exchange, for instance, or even if the buyer doesn't know it's coming from the issuer, which was really big, and that's Ripple's 1% of market volume programmatic sale, through Coinbase. That's huge, because that actually ends the 34 Act in terms of looking at Coinbase, Kraken, et cetera, as exchanges. That's just massive. The other one that I think maybe slipped under the wire a little bit is the one with OKDAO, which is where a court it wasn't a final decision, but on a motion to dismiss, decided that all of the holders of the Dow Gov token could conceivably be jointly and severally liable for a $55 million hack if they found that there was negligence. And that really should send, a massive warning to everybody who's kind of forming their DAO without any kind of an entity, without any kind of thought in terms of legal for how do we execute on the protocol votes. It's a big deal. And, it needs to be thought of. The government's answer to there's nobody there is never going to be positive. So that was, certainly one of the biggest ones, and I could go on for a long time. So I will if you want me to.
Yeah, I mean, DAOs are a strange and wonderful thing. I remember when that DAO came out to buy Blockbuster a few years ago, and there's the DAO that tried to buy the Constitution, and then I guess they lost, but then they bought it after the fact. I'm vaguely familiar with that one at this point, but that'll be something we should get into on the show. But let's start by talking a little bit more about tokenomics, because you mentioned this was sort of a key part of Satoshi Roundtable, and it's always on my mind because it feels like one of those areas where everything's at odds. You want sort of tokenomics that work for the long term of the ecosystem, but it's got to work for the VCs. It's got to work for the founders. It's got to work for the early sort of folks that get excited and sort of nurture that economy. And that whole sort of balance is difficult, I would say. And thus far, I don't think too many people have got it right. So I'm really curious, how do you look at sort of that balance? Both from a regulatory compliance perspective, as well as sort of an innovation and sort of competitive advantage perspective with token projects. And when you're talking to founders that are sort of grappling with this impossible enigma, what are some of your sort of advice you give them in creating a sustainable token economy?
Oh my gosh. So that was a mouthful, and it's going to generate a mouthful. First off, the main advice that I give absolutely all my clients is don't rip anybody off and don't give them enough rope to hang themselves. And if you do that, you're ahead of the game compared to many. On the tokenomics front, it's one of those words that I don't think everybody even means the same thing when they say it. So, just to kind of clarify, the way I tend to think of it is very much the way the Fed manipulates an economy. Is there a DAO, a project, somebody, or a protocol for that matter, manipulating the token economy, the whole token economy? I think of that as tokenomics. A lot of folks who are particularly investment oriented, they just look at who's getting the initial tokens. And it might be some percentage to team, some percentage goes to investors, some percent goes to community participants or, key influencers, that type of thing. But what they need to kind of understand is that all of that is subservient to managing the ecosystem, or else there will be no ecosystem. There will be no value. And one of the problems that we've got is that a lot of folks feel like 2017 was a good thing, and you can buy things at a discount and 30 days later immediately sell them for market price, and it's going to drive everything down really far. But it doesn't matter because everybody's spending money. Because who doesn't like a fast return? And the investors are looking at equity. Okay, it's going to be a while till we see anything. It's got to be an exit. But the tokens, we can get a return on the tokens, but it's not really that easy, because if they all dump the tokens, and if the team dumps the tokens, you've got no value, and there's no liquidity in the market and all kinds of things of that nature. So it's really important for folks who are getting money to get money from people who understand, lockups and releases and timing and things like that, and who will really look, particularly if it's a protocol, really look at the protocol to understand how it manages inflation and deflation and how their actions are going to potentially affect things.
That makes sense. So, when your clients are coming to you though, in sort of grappling with this, it sounds like you're sort of asking them to look beyond their primary sort of buckets per se of how they're dividing the tokens, and looking at sort of the inputs and outputs of their token economy and how to make sure that works. Is that sort of a fair statement?
Yeah, it's half fair, I guess, is the thing. I'm not designing their tokenomics for them. Usually somebody comes to me and it's because they either want to issue a token, usually outside the United States, or they want to take in funds and there's a token element to those funds. And one of our roles at that point is to just look at what they're proposing doing. What does the term sheet say? And look at the white paper and talk to the founders and figure out, are you going to run into a lot of trouble down the line? And that's kind of a very important thing in this particular area, which I think a lot of lawyers kind of forget because it's not really legal. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what that is, but it's not really legal work. But at the same time, you can't set your client up to fail. That's just, that's bad business.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is happening is making sure that, or there should be happening as a lawyer, is compliance. And one of the things that you have made some content in the past with educational, and one of the things you recently discussed was the Corporate Transparency Act. Can you kind of tell us more about it and like how does this affect crypto businesses?
Ooh, absolutely. So the Corporate Transparency Act is actually any business, any entity that files to do business in the United States, whether it's incorporated or an LLC, or if it's just a foreign company that comes in and qualifies to do business by filing in a particular state where it's got a bunch of revenue coming from or employees or what have you. Every single business has to either file or be exempted. And there's 23 or so exemptions that cover things like public companies and insurance companies and broker dealers and basically the main companies you think of who are already regulated. And then it also has an exemption for what it calls, quote, large operating companies, which means that you've got, north of $10 million of gross revenue on your prior tax return. You've got 20 employees at least, and you've got a physical location in the United States. And the logic kind of makes sense in the sense that those are clearly not shell companies, so they're not as much of a risk of there being money laundering going through them. In practice, it's a lot more difficult than that to kind of analyze it. But for the crypto industry, and I'll say the Web3 industry, because it's really for all industries, but this is what we're looking at. If you've got your entity and it's formed here or filed here, you've got to comply with this thing, and it's not hard to comply. But it does require disclosing to the government who your investors are. And if your investors, particularly if your investors are non-US tax residents, they may not like that so much. And you need information from them or else you can't do it. You need, the equivalent of a passport. You need, a photo. You need to have their address. You should have that stuff, the address piece anyways. And, it's nothing that's not part of KYC. But filing it with the US government's an entirely different thing. And I don't think we've really heard the uproar from that yet, but we will. And meanwhile, for anybody who does this type of investing, you can do everybody a favor and get a FinCEN ID number so that you can keep it updated yourself, and they just have to give you a number.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder. As people are getting into crypto, of course, there have been people out there who have decided to take on funds or investors, and some have had large success, but they don't necessarily have the compliance that you just described. So I think this is a good, gentle reminder. And I think, as a follow up to that, how can businesses like take active steps to make sure that they are not just compliant in this, but are being cognizant of just being in I guess general compliance with potentially doing that type of business here in the States?
Right. So, I mean, I recognize that very, startup type projects can't necessarily afford legal. But really, as soon as you can get legal involved and get legal that knows what they're doing in the space involved, so that, somebody can help you through this stuff, because it's so easy to fall into a compliance trap. It's so easy to fall into a bad tax structure. That's when we had the most recent bear, coming off the NFT sales. If you were an NFT project and you sold out, 10,000 tokens and you were paid, 1 ETH in all of them, and at the time ETH was, $4,500, and then 3 months later ETH is, $1,500, and the government still wants the income as if you made $4,500. That's a big problem. We had some clients that had that issue. And you wouldn't think of that when you're happily designing, your generative NFT art.
So what do you do at that point, or is it too late?
Yeah. So engaging, us or somebody like us is really a good move. You are going to, well, I'll give a little bit of the secrets away, I suppose. You are going to work really hard to figure out how to get your expenses that you actually spent legally to kind of also move up to, a level of, the magnitude that helps a little bit. And also, honestly, you might just have to prepare to take it on the chin. Tax is tax. Not a huge fan of it, but it is what it is.
Understood. Well, let's go back to Dows, which I wanted to allude to as a future topic, and now we're here. So we talked a little bit about some of the challenges of Dows and the legal precedences. And your firm has spoken on Dow Tokens and the concerns about the constitutionality of the serving process via chatbot. Can you speak more to this particular example and just more generally to Dows in terms of what you see as the potential and the risks?
Yeah, that's another topic that could cover, the whole time that we're here. So, what you really got initially was a subpoena was served in a case in New York. I forget the name of the case. And the judge basically said, okay, you don't know where this person is. You don't know who this person is, but you do know who their what their wallet address is. So we're going to let you send a subpoena by that. Never mind how they would enforce it, because I don't know. But nonetheless, they did that. The government kind of leaned on that, which was fairly reasonable in my mind, to decide, okay, Dow, right? Okay, X, we're going to serve process for a complaint like that. And they convinced a judge to let them do it when, there was nobody there representing the Dow, certainly. So, in my mind, they maybe hoodwinked this judge a little bit, but the judge let them serve process to everybody who was holding, a Gov token. Now, as you mentioned, that, our Constitution has the Fourth Amendment, which requires due process of law before the government can take anything from you. And the whole reason why, service of a complaint has to be, personal, usually, unless you acknowledge it, is to comply with that. You're not supposed to be able to drop it in the mailbox and just assume it got there. But that's exactly what the government did, and more so, they dropped it in a mailbox that many people wouldn't even be looking at anymore, or don't look at very frequently, or whatever it's going to be. So yeah, I think that one was a no-no.
Yeah, makes sense. And just touching on sort of, you talked about the challenges of DAOs. Is there anything that gets you excited when it comes to DAOs and the potential and use cases of DAOs that you're sort of looking forward to?
Yeah, sure. And thank you. I didn't answer half of your last question, so we'll get that going. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are interesting about DAOs. There is no other methodology that I'm aware of that can as quickly and easily kind of unite for a common goal disparate people anonymously all over the planet. And that's insanely cool. So yes, exciting, very exciting. The catch is that as an entity, you can't do anything unless you are recognized by the sovereign of wherever you happen to be. So, you can't, if you're just a DAO, no entity forms, you can't contract, you can't employ anybody, you can't really do anything. And if you try to, a court is going to do like what they did in the OKDAO case, which is OKX case, I keep doing that, which is to say, oh, you're a general partnership, because that's what you are if more than one person does something together. And that's a horrible thing to be, because you're jointly and severally liable for absolutely everything that everybody does. And it doesn't work in this context either. So, there's no perfect solve yet. There are a few attempts. One of them, obviously, a number of states have decided that they've got their DAO entity. And the DAO entity stuff, it's not really there in my mind, because you're not autonomous if you're recognized by a sovereign. If the sovereign can say, you didn't pay your franchise taxes, we're going to take your charter and we're going to say you're not in good standing, you can't do anything anymore, you can't go to court. That's not an autonomous organization. Now, that said, what you can do is you can form what we call an execution entity someplace. Doesn't have to be in the United States. Oftentimes it can be a nonprofit, and that's a good idea, so nobody actually owns it. And you burn into its constitution that it is going to, subject to applicable law, slavishly follow everything that the Dow votes on. And that it's going to do the execution, because then it can employ people, it can sue, it can pay out funds, all that kind of good stuff. But you've got one problem, which is what if that entity goes off the rails? And our solve for that one is just to also burn into the Constitution something that says, if we go off the rails and somebody needs to sue us, we're going to waive any argument of standing or jurisdiction for somebody who comes in because the Dow voted them in to enforce. And I think that that's a pretty good check, but it's a lot of heavy lifting. It's me legal engineering this thing. So there's plenty of time for us to come up with alternative structures, and I'm sure we will.
I think so as well, but I think that's a really good reminder for people who are looking at this from, like, there's the altruistic, like, autonomous and like feel good reason of like why DAOs make a lot of sense and why you would want to form one, but it doesn't mean that it legally stands up in court in the States. And so you need to be able to put things in place. And I think this is a good reminder for people who are a part of these things to start thinking through that and really start to, get in compliance and figure out how they can legally protect themselves and uplift like the whole goal of the DAO of being set up in the first place.
I think what you're saying, Richard, is it should be a really conscious, thought out process of deciding to create a DAO. It's not one of those things where you wake up in the morning and go, oh, like, we all care about this, let's just go create a DAO. Because there's a lot of implications of doing so that need to be thought through.
Right.
Yeah. Most definitely.
You just give me a vision of, like, my daughter who's in middle school having all the students members of the DAO that decides, what color the mascot's going to be this year. You can do that. That's okay.
Yeah, so many great use cases, but as we evolve,
Not one, by the way, but it can happen.
Right. Well, as we kind of wrap up this segment before we head into the next, I want to go back to NFTs just for a second. So you brought up a consideration that people need to be like wary of like, you do your initial NFT drop, and at the time it was 45, and then by the time it's time to do taxes, it's down to 15. Like, what does that mean? So that's a consideration. But like, what are some other considerations around the NFT economy that you think people should be aware of? And as a secondary question, what are some use cases that you're excited about?
Sure. So it's difficult because it's so broad. One thing I want to get away from is the idea that NFTs are, JPEGs that maybe come along with intellectual property rights if the terms and conditions say they do. What an NFT really is, as the court in Ripple noticed, it's a snippet of software code. That court wasn't dealing with NFTs, but that's what they were saying about tokens in general. So, as a snippet of software code, it's really media. And the question isn't how do we deal with the NFT? The question is how do we deal with the asset that is represented by the NFT? The same way, you wouldn't ask, how do I deal with a piece of paper? You'd say, okay, what does this paper represent? And that's what we have to regulate. So, when you look at things from that perspective, the use cases are infinite. You've got this new form of media that can represent something that can also serve as a key that allows you to execute something that can also serve as a key that allows you to access data that's feeding in. And you can combine all of those. And if you want to, you can even have another use case and multiple use cases. And there's no wonder that the law has trouble dealing with this, and it does. In terms of use cases I'm excited by, I'm really right now very excited by NFTs that key to particular Internet of Things devices. So, if you've got a cow and your cow is being shipped from South America to North America, and you put a geospatial location tag on its ear, that stream of data coming from that tag can be accessed by anybody who's got access to this particular NFT. And that's really interesting. If I'm a lender, I can now, collateralize based on that and see it. If I'm an insurance company, that NFT that is keyed into the cow, that might also have its veterinary records so that if the boat the cow is on sinks, sorry, cow, the insurance company knows whether it's paying a claim or not. So that's one use case. The art use cases obviously are there, and as much as it's taken a beating, I like the fact that art has been democratized and that you don't really need to live in a major city anymore to get attention. And that may not be a perfectly true statement, but it's kind of on the way there. So that piece I think is huge. Beyond that piece of it, there's a lot of financial use cases, and my suspicion is NFTs will replace paper. So you can think of all that kind of includes.
Oh, that's a big statement. We're not going to unpack all that, but wow, that's a big one. I like that. I haven't heard someone say that before. So
yeah, I shouldn't say replace paper because there's no substitute for seeing what you wrote in notes and things of that nature. But
yeah, it's good stuff, Josh. And really appreciate your perspective on all this. As you alluded to, we could talk about any of these topics for quite a long time. And we didn't even really get into AI, which is a whole other can of worms. But there'll be more times for us to have these conversations and unpack all of this interesting stuff. And I'm sure when we look back at this year, there'll be some new precedents and legal cases to talk about that haven't even come up yet. So appreciate the opportunity to unpack some of this world of legal and NFTs and tokens, but we also want to get to know you better. So let's move on to our next segment. NFTLA returns as an inclusive week of community events throughout LA, celebrating the outer edge of innovation.
Builders be building.
There's so much energy colliding around gaming, AI, generative art, the metaverse, decentralized social, and the future of entertainment.
If you want to be in the mix, including the official free NFTLA celebration, visit outeredge.live to subscribe for your updates and RSVP.
All right, it's time for Edge Quick Hitters, which is a fun, quick way to get to know you a little bit better. There are 10 questions, and we're looking for just a short, single, or few-word response, but feel free to expand if you get the urge. You ready?
I feel like I should have changed my shirt. Yeah, go for
it. just make sure you have enough deodorant. That's all. Yeah. All right. What is the first thing you remember ever purchasing in your life?
Hard candy.
That's a common one. Did you buy that with your allowance, or did you wheel and deal to get the money?
I probably found the change that paid for that. I'm going to guess that that's me finding, a nickel or quarter or something on the street, because back then that's what it costs. And there was a lot of that.
Very resourceful young buck. So what is the first thing you remember ever selling in your life?
Oh, I don't know that I could call it selling newspapers by having a paper route, because they really weren't mine. I think I sold somebody. All right. So I grew up in the 70s, so things are not what they are now. So I think I sold somebody a keychain with a rabbit's foot on it in second grade for, something minimal, like I'm not sure what. Obviously, we don't make rabbit's foot keychains anymore. It's a disgusting thing in this context, but, back then we didn't know any better.
Noted.
Giving the people good luck. All right. Or so they say. Well, what is the most recent thing you purchased?
Oh, wow. I almost feel like I need to look on my Amazon account to see what. Oh, you guys are going to love this one. A gray leotard. The reason
we need a backstory.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. So my daughter has a role in her class play as a mouse. And she needed to have a gray leotard. So, we went hunting for one of those this weekend, and they're not that easy to find, actually. That was the one.
That's awesome.
To your point, about 99% of what you need in life you can buy on Amazon now. So, but this wasn't an Amazon purchase?
No, it was not. You've got a sizing issue with, my daughter. You've got the fact that, I didn't think it was going to be that hard when I first left. First stop was Target. Nope. Second stop was Walmart. Nope. Dick's. Nope. Okay. And finally, I wised up and called the Google Assistant and said, "Where can I buy leotards and got like a dance specialty shop, which is getting to be a rarity. I'll mention, they no longer take credit cards because business is thin enough that they just can't afford the merchant fee, which is just extremely sad.
Yeah, goodness. That is very interesting. Well, going back to your resourcefulness, finding a way to get your dog that leotard, but also unfortunate to hear about the merchant fee. Hey, another use case for crypto. All I'm saying, you're just helping to prove the point.
Yeah, to be clear, it absolutely is. I was thinking about it the entire time I was in that store, and I was like, what is it gonna take this person comfortable enough that she would put the entire financial piece onto a blockchain and work through a wallet? Because that's one of the places we need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the most recent thing that you've sold?
Girl Scout cookies.
Nice. So what is your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
I'd say all right. So if you freeze the Thin Mints and you break it in half and drop it into a martini, it's awesome. So I'm going to go with Thin Mints on that one.
Nice. That's the first time I've heard that one.
What is your most prized possession, Josh?
Prized possession, I've got a X-Men #1 that I bought in 1980 whatever for $200 on the layaway plan. That, along with the rest of my comic collection, has migrated with me. I know it's like super juvenile, but it is what it is. And that probably would be #1 as far as prized possession. Certainly, it's kind of my most valuable possession at this point in time.
I gotta say, I'm a big Wolverine fan.
I've got Hulk 181 also.
Nice.
That's first Wolverine. For anybody, for the listeners, that's the first appearance of Wolverine, other than the shadow of him 180. So, all right. Yeah.
No, it's awesome. A lot of our audience is gonna be able to connect with that. Someone's gonna vibe like, yes, this guy gets it.
Josh, so if you could buy anything in the world, digital, physical, service, or experience that's currently for sale, what would it be?
That is a extremely difficult question. It would probably, and this is going to sound super goofy, but I'm 53 years old, so it's kind of the right timing. I would probably buy just the complete, thorough, don't miss anything medical exam, which is not what your insurance gets for you, and is multi-thousands of dollars to do that. That's kind of the thing that's kind of on my mind right now most.
Nice.
All right. So for the next question, if you could pass on one of your personality traits to the next generation, what would it be?
So I have 2 kids, so I'm trying to do that. There's fortunately a lot of choices. I'd say resourcefulness would be the first one. And I could go on for an hour also about, parenting in 2024. But one of the big things is, teaching the kids to keep going and keep doing something, even if they fail at it, or, even if they forgot whatever tool it is that they need or whatever it is, life goes on and you have to keep going. I think that's maybe a little bit of a lost art. So that would probably be it.
Yeah, it's a big one. Unfortunately, social media has definitely given the instant gratification-ness of things, and even the gamification of like current games of instant gratification is teaching the current generation to not deal with adversity and having to keep pushing through. So I feel you on that one. That's definitely a challenging one. On the flip side, if you could remove or eliminate one of your personality traits for the next generation, what would that be?
So I'm a big proponent of the idea that everything happens for a reason. So that's a very difficult question because I don't know that I would actually remove anything, even the stuff that I really don't like about myself. But putting that aside, I would take away the procrastination in a heartbeat. That's the one that gets me. And it's not because I don't want to do stuff. It's because, and I've realized this, it's exciting to me to come up against a deadline. like that's it. It doesn't matter how much time you give me because it's actually the deadline that's causing the procrastination. If the deadline's not coming, I'm not getting, my dopamine hit. So procrastination is kind of a big deal for me.
The way you describe that, you literally just described my wife. So like, I'm literally, when this goes live, I'm going to send this to her and be like, this is you. So thank you. Like, that is awesome.
Basically, both Josh and your wife are adrenaline junkies is what it comes down to. and that's like the nice way of like complimenting a procrastinator. I'm going to use that in the future as well. This is eye-opening.
All right. Happy I could help.
Josh, 9th question, a little bit easier. What did you do just before joining us on the podcast?
Well, I probably took a handful of mixed nuts and ate that. I think that's probably exactly what I did.
Nice. And last question, what are you going to do next after the podcast?
Let's see, 2:33. Legal work, most likely. I think I've got an appointment with a client that I need to help through. Very popular Web3 game company, actually.
Cool. Web3 gaming is on the rise. So thanks for contributing to that progress. It's a really exciting area that we talk about on the show a lot.
Yeah, I have a very dull life, though. So it's like, what have I done? I've puttered about the house. Woo!
Well, we always do like to finish with a fun bonus question. But the one that I kind of want to frame this way, because we don't get to talk to lawyers all the time. What is your most memorable case that you can talk about?
Okay, so I don't really do cases. I do transactions, but I'll assume that you're talking about, whatever matter it happens to be. And that's also a really hard question because I've been doing this for 29 years. So, there's a lot of things that I've really enjoyed and a lot of things that have been just amazing experiences, or in some cases, just extremely strange experiences. I would say that some of the stuff that I'm doing right now for one of our protocol clients, and I don't want to get into which one, but nobody would have heard of them at this point anyways, because they haven't released, probably hits it. I've been working with this team for 6 years. They haven't released, but what they've got is just amazing as far as use of blockchain for transactions per second, and also for allowing some functionality that horrible answer. I'm sorry, but that would be it. I can take another shot at answering this if you like and not do that.
No, I mean, if that's your most memorable, by all means. But
all right, so memorable. I didn't even go to memorable. Memorable was probably a family law case that I did when I came right out of law school between one person, our client, and his wife, obviously, and he was trying to divorce her in another country before she could divorce him in California. And we went into court one day, and it was emotion, and the partner who was with me gave his version of the facts, and she, I kid you not, stood up in the gallery and yelled, "Liar!" and almost got contempt of court. And that was certainly memorable.
Yeah. I don't know how you forget that one. That's hilarious.
Well, thanks, Josh, for sharing a little bit more about yourself. And, I feel like I've known you a while, but I feel like I know you even that much better now.
That much better. I'll have to turn the tables at some point when we're at some event and just kind of, well, Mr. Krieger.
This is the challenge of putting a lawyer under the sort of edge quick hitter scrutiny, because I know that you can get back to me at some point, but that's fine. I'll be ready. In the meantime, we have one more segment before we adjourn for the day, which is going to be Hot Topic.
Okay. Hot Topic.
So we don't always have time for covering hot topics, but this one is just too hot to not talk about. And that is the ERC-404 standard that has emerged as an unofficial token standard. and the origin story and implications have been unveiled. So according to milkroad.com, the ERC-404 has infiltrated the crypto landscape, originating from a tumultuous crypto project called Emerald. It now powers Pandora, which is blending fungible and non-fungible tokens, and it's been hailed for its innovation and also caution amidst its experimental nature and susceptibility to scams. And I have to say, I was at coffee with some crypto folks on Sunday, and it was the only thing everyone could talk about. And there's been a lot of forks and sort of everyone's like first to launch on different chains. But would love sort of your opinion, Josh. What is this ERC-404 all about, and how does it differ from existing token standards?
Sure, absolutely. So, you kind of tagged what it's about, is that you can have an NFT that has its own kind of fungible token kind of segments. And there's, also another one that has just come to light called Cellmate that, does something similar, but in a different way that allows multiple people to own the same NFT. I'm an evangelist of technology in general, this technology particularly. So somebody developed something new and that's really cool. I don't know what the applications are going to be yet, but I do know that our government will not be ready for them. My take on it is be careful. Recognize, what you are doing, not the technology, but the underlying use case, what you're doing and such. Can have real repercussions. So, like most things, my first reaction is kind of like, it'll, I'm sure, develop into the right use cases and boil out. It's neat, to be sure, no question.
Yeah, I think this idea of being able to sort of share ownership has been something that blockchain has tried to achieve for quite some time. We've talked about sort of artists, cooperating on a piece and how do they co-own the royalties that come out of that as one use case. And, this is exciting to people. It sort of thinks, you think about sort of shared ownership of property and how complicated that is in society. And I think what you're getting at is that, yeah, you peel back the onion here and it's just as complicated when you're talking about blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. And for this one, shared access is really one of the items. So, imagine you're an artist and you're fighting the copyright wars on artificial intelligence and probably going to lose those. And you're, using your NFTs to sell things. But the new standard becomes that, it's got to be 100 copies because that's what people want. So everybody owns the same NFT and you've sold that, but, you're not able to have the same kind of scarcity that you used to have. That's one, issue. By the way, each of those 100 copies, if you sold it the wrong way, might be a security, even though it's the same NFT. So for anybody who's thinking that, digital assets are securities, yeah, it doesn't quite work that way.
Richard, any thoughts so far on the 404? I know we're all just digesting it in real time.
Yeah, it's a really good gentle reminder and great timing to speak with Josh about this, about like, as awesome as like technology is and like new innovations and everything else, there's always like a legal side to this. And like, how many times are people really not even like really starting with that, of like the approach of like, okay, well, how do we do this, make this really awesome and be compliant? And just to your point, like I wouldn't even thought like that's not a first thought. That's like a 10th or 11th or 12th thought about that. And then like by the time a lot of people who are hearing this right now, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go do this really cool thing. And then they're 10 steps deep. They're like, oh no, what did I just do? And,
right. Yeah, it's a boring and annoying thought is the problem. But nonetheless, it's a thought. To that effect, I kind of have to go back to what I said before, what I tell my clients: don't rip anybody off and don't give them enough rope to hang themselves, because, it's very easy to trample the letter of the law. But if you're upholding kind of the standards, you're not going to have much in the way of damages. You're not going to be a big target for folks. Law cannot keep up with technology. That is a fact, at least the way we currently legislate. So there's always going to be stuff that is not quite illegal, but is immoral, that people are going to be able to do on the edges. And I think, one of the things is we really need to police our own community in terms of not having people do bad stuff. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, there's always going to be bad stuff you can do that's not quite going to be illegal yet. Just don't do bad stuff.
Yeah, well said, Josh, and thanks for sort of shining the light on this new 404 standard. It's definitely going to be something that we all talk about a lot over the next few months, because like other technology that's emerging, once it's here, and now we just have to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. No, ETH Denver is in a few weeks, and I am sure that it will be quite the frequent topic.
Well, yeah. So one last thing, and we can talk a little bit about ETH Denver. We'll be there too. That it's going to be a lot of fun. Besides the shopkeeper that's selling great leotards for your daughter's recital, is there anyone you want to shout out in your world that maybe doesn't get enough attention on the airwaves, but has had sort of an impact on you?
Yeah. One of the principal of one of my clients, a guy named Chris McCoy, who is an absolute software genius. And he was the guy who first told me that it wasn't that everybody else didn't understand it. It was that I did. In other words, that's the guy who kind of pointed me in the direction of, I can be special at this. So shout out to Chris McCoy and Store Labs, big time. I have a lot of clients that I really like a lot, and I don't want to shout out to any other ones because I don't want the ones I don't shout out to get really mad at me. I'd like to thank my mother and my cat Pumpkin.
There we go. And yeah, if you're one of Josh's clients, then just pretend that he shouted you out on this episode because he cares about all of you equally. So, Josh, this has been so much fun, and excited about the segment we're going to have in our newsletter where folks can learn a little bit more about different nuances of blockchain law. But besides sort of finding you out and about at ETH Denver, where can listeners go to learn more about you and the projects that you're working on?
Sure. So I should be putting more stuff out. My handle is J Lawler, Cal, the letter J, my first initial, Lawler, my last name, and Cal because I'm in California. And that is my handle on WhatsApp, Telegram, and what used to be called Twitter. So that part's pretty simple. And then periodically our firm releases different things on different topics. I do go to a lot of events and speak. And if you're watching this and you're going to be at ETH Denver, or you're going to be at NFT NYC, or you're going to be at Paris Blockchain Week, or Token 2049 Dubai, and my calendar goes on and on, that's often a good place to catch me too.
Yeah, and I can vouch for it. Josh is everywhere. So hopefully you won't feel intimidated to come up and introduce yourself and get to know him and what these guys are doing for the space. Really appreciate your time here today, Josh.
Oh, my pleasure, guys. A lot of fun.
We've reached the outer limit at the edge of NFT for today. Thanks for exploring with us. We've got space for more adventures on the Starship. So invite your friends and recruit some cool strangers that will make this journey also much better. How? If you're listening, go to Spotify or iTunes right now, rate us and say something awesome. If you're watching on this YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button and pass this episode on to a friend or two. Lastly, be sure to tune in next time for more great Web3 content. Thanks again for sharing this time with us today.
The views and opinions expressed on Edge of NFT reflect solely those views and opinions of the show hosts and its guests. Please make sure to do your own research. Our show is not financial advice. You understand that you are using any and all information available on or through this podcast at your own risk. Whenever making financial decisions, we recommend doing your own research and talking to your accountant for financial advice. From time to time, we may feature sponsored content on the show for which we receive value, and we may share links for which we receive a commission if you make a purchase through one of those links. Refer to our website, www.edgeofnft.com, for our full disclaimer, terms and conditions, and privacy policy.